You're the guy people call when they need a helping hand, moving furniture, unloading a truck. But lately, your shoulder's been acting up, and you're the one who's calling for help. And that's the moment you realize you can no longer shoulder the load.
The Joint and Spine Center is Cincinnati's leading destination for orthopedic care with a range of surgical and non-surgical treatments. So when a moment has the power to change the rest of your life, go to the one place with the power to change it for the better, the Christ Hospital Health Network. This changes everything.
The Pound This Podcast is brought to you by the Christ Hospital Health Network. This is the Pound This Podcast, episode 549, The Daily Weigh-In, How Do I Count Macros?
I want to lose weight, but I don't know how to get started.
What should I meal prep every week?
How do I get those sweet booty gains?
Inspiration for your healthy lifestyle. The Pound This Podcast with Amanda Valentine.
Thank you so much for listening to the Pound This Podcast. I am Amanda Valentine, and this is the Daily Weigh-In, where I take your questions and answer them. And this was a very popular question that I got on Instagram this week, which was, how do I figure out my macros? And so I wanted to address this question. If you ever have any questions for me, you can always find me in my email at amanda@amandavалентиnebites.com or on Instagram at You Can Pound This. And that's where I get these specific episodes for this podcast. The Daily Weigh-In is those questions. And if you ever have a question I personally can't answer, I will find an expert on the topic and invite them on the podcast and hopefully get your questions answered. Now, when we come to macros, this is going to be a tough podcast because this has to be broad sweeping statements because every person is so different that I can't give you a specific answer to this question. But generally, when you hear somebody counting their macros, or if it fits your macros or eating with macros are just your macronutrients. And so we're going from the big ones here are protein, carbs, and fat. So basically, you kind of divide up what your diet is based on those numbers of what you want to hit your macronutrients are. And you can either eat just based on hitting your macros or do a balance between that and calories if you want to count those things. Now, where macros are important is because if you're going by calories alone, you can think of you're eating, let's just say 2,000 calories a day. You could eat 2,000 calories worth of candy corn every day. And is that going to give you the fuel for your body? Is that going to satisfy you? Is that going to run your engine like a balanced, 2,000 calories of fats, carbs, and proteins? So that's why, macros come into play is if you want to just learn to eat more balanced. Now, what's difficult is that everybody's macro balance is different, and it's different for whatever stage that you're in and whatever your goals are. So generically, if you want to figure out what your macros are, I highly recommend, there's math problems you can do, but we live in the internet. You know what I'm saying? You're listening to this via having some sort of internet connection. So just Google calorie or macro calculator. I love MyFitnessPal. I also had a lot of questions this week about using MyFitnessPal, and I've been using it. Oh my God. I think I started using MyFitnessPal, maybe 2011 or 12, or it had to be 2012 because that's when I started this weight loss journey. I wasn't obsessive with it at first. I had a very on and off relationship with counting calories, and now I really enjoy counting calories, but I think that if that's not your jam, then don't do it if it doesn't feel good. But I think in order for weight loss, you're going to have an idea of where you're at because you do want to eat in a caloric deficit in order to lose weight. So Google online. If you don't want to use MyFitnessPal or Lose It or any of those apps, you can just look up calorie calculator or macro calculator, and basically it's going to figure out what your general needs, what calorie you need to just run every day. You're going to put in your height, your weight, your activity, how active you are every day, just in everyday life, outside of exercise, to just kind of figure out what caloric needs you have to just operate exactly where you are now and to just keep that train a-rolling. If you were just to just eat that calorie amount every day, you're going to stay exactly the same. So now you know that if you want to gain weight, you need to be a little bit above that number. If you want to lose weight, you need to kind of be a little bit below that number. So once you figure out what the calorie count is, then you can dive into macros to basically go into, out of that amount, how do I need to divvy things up? Now, this is just a very, very general statement of what you think that your macronutrients should be. Carbs around 45 to 65% of your total calories, fats between 20 and 35% of your total calories, proteins between 10 and 35% of your total calories. But that's very generic. I mean, I've done one of these calculators before, and based off of what it said I needed, it was very carb heavy like that. And I noticed that my body does better, higher protein, lower carb. But you got it. This is where the experimenting comes in, because you're just kind of just guessing, because, your body runs differently than any other body on this planet. Like, we all have our own chemistry, we all have everything going on in our lives. So that's where it's hard to say, figure out what your calorie needs are, figure out what your macro needs are, and then you got to play around from there. And that's where it's really good to have a health coach or a registered dietitian or somebody that can kind of help you through that. Cause that's where it can be frustrating, where you can count you might go, that's what your macros are. That's what this thing where the calculator spits out what you should try. And you might gain some weight on that, or you might just stay steady. And that's where it's time okay, well, this is how I feel on this. And I know for me, manipulating with my macros, I've had to bring the carbs down a little bit, and I bring the fats and proteins up. And whenever the fats are a little bit higher, I stay full longer. I just generally feel better. I feel less hungry. I feel more satiated. I just operate better with higher fats and proteins and lower carbs. And that is just me personally. But I know a lot of friends of mine that run so much better on higher carbs and back the proteins down a lot. And that's how their body runs. I know for me right now, what I have in MyFitnessPal, again, this is just for me and my specific needs. Right now, I'm at 30% fat, 49% protein, and 21% carbs. And for me, when I put that into, because I pay for the premium of MyFitnessPal, and I have my calorie count in there for what my goals are right now, and what I kind of want to hit. And for me, I at my stage where I'm at right now, I don't try to hit those macros specifically. I'm not trying to bullseye them every day, but just to give me a better general idea of how I'm eating and what my foods, what categories they fall into. And I think that's it. I think, I think intuitive eating is so great too, but I think that in order to get there, you have to understand how your body, runs off of food and what is actually in some food. So I think that it's good to keep a journal and to keep track of this stuff at least a little bit, and at least experiment with it so you have an idea, so you can learn from it. And again, it doesn't have to be prisoner, I'm counting calories, I'm obsessive over it, this sucks, this is dieting. It can be, hey, I'm just kind of learning about what foods are and how many proteins and carbs are actually in broccoli. You know what I mean? It can be a learning experience of what's in your food and how your body reacts to it. And I think that when you kind of think of yourself as this chemistry set, and you're kind of like, oh man, I am just this living animal, and how does food operate with that? And then still having that balance of I still want to eat cheesecake. And guess what? When you're counting calories and macros, you can still put cheesecake in there. It just gives you an idea of anytime that I eat anything that's, not chicken and broccoli or whatever, I absolutely log it. And I don't feel guilty about it of oh God, no, it gives me a good idea of just what kind of chunk that takes out of my normal routine, what the fats look like. Because when you put that in there, and it's not to shame yourself to not eating cheesecake. I mean, cheesecake freaking rules, at least in my opinion. But it's it's good to know of when you have a slice of cheesecake, exactly what's kind of going on in that slice of cheesecake for me, because it puts my own personal brakes on myself of I feel satiated. I love eating that slice of cheesecake. I don't need to eat the whole cheesecake. You know what I mean? For me, it just being armed with knowledge helps me so much on my own journey. So I really hope that answers your question, because it's hard to answer unless we have a one-on-one and we're really kind of looking at your needs, what your goals are, where your body's at, where you want your body to be, where you want your mental state to be, what's your relationship with food. There's a million things that go into it. But again, I think that if you're looking for an easy solution, a good starting point for yourself, download an app like MyFitnessPal or Lose It, use an online calculator, or join an online community, or just ask for help. Like ask for someone to help you, or somebody that's been on this journey before, and be like, hey, can you help me out here? Can you help me, guide me? Ask for help all day long. Ain't no shame in that game, because it can be confusing and it can be hard. But I think that if you're just doing your best, then that's your best, and you should feel good at that. There's no right or wrong way. Because somebody counts calories doesn't mean it's the right way to do it. Because somebody counts macros doesn't mean it's the right way to do it. Because somebody is keto doesn't mean it's the right way to do it. Because somebody is South Beach doesn't mean it's the right way to do it. Because somebody does intermittent fasting doesn't mean it's the right way to do it. If somebody does CrossFit, it doesn't mean it's the right way to do it. And the list goes on, right? It's whatever is right for you, and it's trial and error, and you got this as long as you have it in your heart that, you want to be healthy for you, and you want this, and you want more knowledge, and you want to feel good in your own body. Like, you got this. That's going to pull you through it, and give everything a try. Try counting macros. If you hate it, then bounce on it. I've bounced on counting calories multiple times in my journey just because it stressed me out, and I didn't use it in the way that I do now, which is now I kind of plan it out the day before. For me, that helps my stress levels. So when I'm laying in bed at night, dinking around my phone like I always do, I pull up MyFitnessPal, and I generally have half of my day meal prepped. I have my breakfast for this week. I have breakfast and lunches and dinners prepped out, so I can already put that into MyFitnessPal. And then I know what I have to play with for the rest of the day for snacks, and have a general idea. And so when I have it kind of mapped out the night before, the day of, it just takes some stress off for me. And that's not to say that things don't go the way I plan. Everything changes. Sometimes it's like my husband orders pizza and he's like, hey, do you want a pizza, right? Slice of pizza? Sometimes I say no. Sometimes I say yes. And so that just that's life. You know what I mean? And it's not terrorizing yourself because things don't go according to plan. But for me, it's been very helpful with calorie counting and macro counting to plan it out a day in advance, just because I feel like in the moment, if I'm trying to figure it out, it stresses me out. And that's what I did when I counted calories before, is I would just eat nothing for most of the day because I'd be so worried. I wouldn't eat. And I did the same thing on Weight Watchers when I was counting points. But I want to say the Weight Watchers today is very different than the Weight Watchers I did. I did Weight Watchers in 2007, I want to say, 2006, 2007. And then the counting points was the same for me as counting calories. I wouldn't eat points all day because I'd be so worried that I would run out of them. At the end of the day, I had a ton of points, and then I would just power eat, and I would make bad decisions because I would be so hungry from starving myself all day from the fear of running out of calories or points. And then I would just, go to Chow Town at night, and it didn't work for me. And so for me, I had to learn or just experiment it again. I put that aside. I'm like, that doesn't work for me right now. Came back to it later, and I absolutely love tracking in MyFitnessPal. I've had some streaks in MyFitnessPal where I've just every single day for over a year that I just consistently put it in there because I really enjoyed it. But the moment you don't enjoy it is maybe time to, figure out something else. Again, hope that's helpful. If you ever have any questions, need some help, shoot me an email, amanda@amandavalentinebites.com. You can also find me on Instagram. I am on there way more than I should be. You can pound this and stay healthy, stay well, and I'll talk to you later.
For info on health coaching and more, go to amandavalentinebites.com.